They said the rain began politely, a gray curtain that softened bazaars and made brass bowls look oiled. In July, the monsoon came like a guest who knew the house, a sniff at shutters, a test of tiles, then drumming that drowned smaller noises. Bombay drank it in. Dust became paste, cotton swelled and left a sweet rot in the air. Everyone knew the rhythm, until one night the rain stopped behaving. Gutters leapt their stone lips, nullahs turned to brown ropes, streets became canals in the time it takes to recite a prayer. On Crawford Market, chickens went silent. On the causeway, lamps burned in glass while their reflections sprinted downstream. A constable near the docks watched a rat paddle past his boots, then two, then a flotilla of fur and whiskers. He stepped onto a tea crate and told himself it would pass. By morning, every man on his beat stood on something that wasn't the ground. Bombay in the 1890s was a city of vaults and drains, of colonial bravado over indigenous cleverness, and under both, an older logic carved by water. The British laid pipes and brick sewers. They also built tenements whose courtyards turned into wells when the rain forgot its manners. Rats knew every seam. Their city ran beneath the human one, through bakery cellars, steam laundries, and warm floorboards. They ate what mills dropped and granaries leaked. In the dry months, they were an annoyance. In months like this, they were a rumor in the walls, until the rumor became a tide. Water chased them out. Sewers that had lived a double life, river in June, rat boulevard in March, filled and forced their citizens up through grates and cracks. People woke to the sound of claws, rain within rain. Children heard skittering where they expected lullabies. A woman lifting a trunk found a black knot of bodies pressed against its corner, trying to climb smooth wood. In a clinic off Karnak Road, a compounder swore he saw a rat step over a sleeper's foot and vanish into a seam as if the wall had breathed in. The flood did what floods do. It redistributed. Where rats had been dispersed across cellars and go-downs, they were now packed into courtyards, stairwells, and ceiling beams. People beat at them with broom handles. Cats hunted until they learned better. Boys set buckets with a plank and a smear of ghee, then counted trophies by lantern light. For every rat that died, 3 found a new path. Temples began mornings not with the scrape of rice into bowls, but with the clatter of swept carcasses into baskets. When the water finally lowered its voice, the city took a breath and started to clean. It was then that the second thing arrived, the one without a sound. At first, it felt like heat's ordinary cruelty. A sweeper's boy went home with a headache and a thirst that water could not quench. A porter shivered as if he had stepped into winter. A seamstress found a swelling in her armpit that had not been there the day before. Fever is the language monsoon speaks to the uncareful. Then came other signs, a blackening under the skin, joints aching like old men, a cough that didn't sound like the season. The swelling demanded a new word. The doctors used bubo. By August, the hospitals were full of quiet breaths. Physicians in white coats and pith helmets moved from ward to ward, journals careful but frightened. Reports traveled to the municipal board and onward to offices where signatures looked like policy. Newspapers walked a line between service and panic. No one wanted to scare away ships. Everyone had already been scared by rats. The microscope, the century's new lens, offered an answer too small for the eye. A Frenchman would soon fix the idea with a name, but even before christening, the pattern wrote itself. Rats died first, fleas jumped, people followed. The monsoon had flushed carriers into kitchens and shrines and bundles of straw beneath beds. What water began, hunger and habit completed. When the rains receded, the fleas remained, tucked in fur coats nobody wanted but everybody had. Municipal men swung between disinfectant zeal and logistical despair. They sprinkled carbolic until floors smelled like a slaughterhouse. They ordered whitewash for rooms that had never seen a brush. They wrote rules for airing bedding that had nowhere to be aired. Inspectors came with clipboards and left with fleas in their cuffs. Quarantine, the city decided, would be the instrument. Rope corridors on the pier, guarded doors, whole lanes under watch. Bombay dislikes straight lines. Business insisted, families persuaded, money redrew borders faster than ink could dry. There are numbers you can place on the page: dead rats per bazaar, cases per ward, days between first fever and last breath. There are things that refuse numbers, like the way a neighborhood learns to walk differently when each step could end a life. Men carried friends by ankles and shoulders with a speed that looked like panic but was mercy. Women opened windows long shut against gossip and let air circulate as if air itself were sacred. On Shivaji Road, a bookseller moved his shop to the stoop and sold pamphlets on sanitation to men who had never read a pamphlet in their lives. Every crisis teaches. This one taught the city to listen for small signs. A pile of dead rats by a drain became a bell that rang a week early. A swollen gland in a girl not yet a woman sent inspectors knocking on every door. Doctors learned to lance and drain, to wrap and boil, to burn what could not be saved. Households set rice pots on bricks and swept under them as if truth hid there. Grain sellers hammered lids onto bins and smeared rims with oil. Landlords replaced rotten stair treads because rats preferred the rot. And the city learned to look down. What pride had claimed as modern, a grid of pipes and brick vaults, had become an empire for creatures who needed only shadow and scraps. Engineers climbed into the underworld they had drawn and found sags where silt settled, joints a small persistence could widen into doors, drains choked by cloth, fat, and hair. They redrew and rebuilt, as budgets and tempers allowed, because in a monsoon city, the border between above and below is always under negotiation. The plague ebbed as weather changed. It left scars you could point to, graveyards grown by an acre, families altered by absences, but it also left habits. Rat catchers gained badges. Disinfection squads became ordinary, their tin sprayers glinting in sun that finally returned. Posters taught children the shapes of fleas and the virtue of light. And every July, when clouds stacked like dark books, people checked floors, bins, and seams. The city had been reminded that systems fail where eyes do not go. Did millions of rats truly ride the flood? Numbers shouted in fear grow like mold. In courtyards and markets the story stayed simple. First water, then whiskers, then fever. It is a parable told by cities that trust their pipes too much. In Bombay's case, the lesson traveled beyond the fort and the arches into villages where drains were ditches and kitchens were courtyards. They watched the city's bad luck and hammered lids tighter and stored grain in tins that rang like bell metal. Road to Ruins keeps a ledger of these moments, the points where a system's hidden cost arrives with its own weather. Here the weather was literal. Water reorganized a city. Rats followed the paths people built and did the work people did not want them to do. A germ, too small for a worried mother to see, walked up from the underworld and wrote itself into family histories. We build drains to banish filth. Sometimes we build boulevards for our enemies. Years later, with new roofs over old beams and new pipes in old trenches, the monsoon came again, patient and relentless. On the first hard night, a girl leaned from a balcony and watched the lanes below change shape. She listened, not for thunder, but for a scrabble in the walls. The night kept its secrets. She shut the shutters and slid the iron hook across, with the quiet satisfaction of someone who has learned what to fear and when to be ready. Thank you for listening to Road to Ruins. Subscribe for more true stories where systems fail and people pay the price.